Well, hello, everybody. So mine's going to be a little bit different than the other three people that you have up here on your panel. I'm not going to talk as much about financial. I'll just talk kind of like an overview services of what our department does. Even though we've been around forever, I think people always question, or what do we do, what's going on in that building. So I'll kind of give you an overall, really, of the entire building. So if you pull up to social services and you walk in, you are greeted at the front desk. And on the left side of our building is more the financial help. So we have energy assistance, we have food stamps, we have Medicaid, we have long-term care insurance. So if that is anything, I mean, even if you do not think that you are financially, eligible for any of those services, we still ask you to come in and fill out an application. There are lots of things that are taken into consideration, like, do you pay rent? Do you have an electric bill? So some of those bills that you pay monthly can go against what your income is and help you be, eligible for those things. And then on the other side of our building is where I am, and that's our services, and that's where we do foster care, that's our child protective services, child support, and adult protective services. So that's what I do, is adult services. So there are 3 of us that work in that, well, actually I guess 4 of us that work in that unit. So Rebecca is our supervisor. I am mainly now just doing APS investigations. We have a newer employee, her name is Kara, and she does our IHOS program, which I'll explain what that is. And I will apologize in advance. A lot of our services are kind of acronyms, so I will try to explain what those are. So, and then we have Carol Friend, that is half adult services, and then also does the CAC, which is our child advocacy center that we do have here in Centerville too. So how this all kind of, like, people always ask, like, how do I call in? Like, what do I do? This is happening to my neighbor, or this is happening to a friend. Like, how can I get them help? So just somewhat recently, in the last probably year, maybe year and a half, the number has changed. Prior to that, you would just directly call 410-758-8000, which is the rings to the front desk. But now we have a new number. It's 1-800-917-7383. And that is actually 1-800-91-PREVENT. So when you call that number now, it'll ask you, it's a statewide phone number, so it'll ask you what county you're trying to get in touch with, which obviously you'll say Queen Anne's, and then it will give you a choice of child protective services or adult protective services. So then you pick, I think it's 2 for that. So we have 2 people who are in our office all the time on intake. So you will get a intake worker who is right in our office. And then you just really explain and try when you call in to have as much information as you can. Sometimes people call in and they don't have an address, they don't have a phone number, they don't have a full name, they don't have a date of birth. And I understand that that's not always accessible to you, but try to gather as much information as you can. And then all of your information will be taken from that intake person, and that is then screened. So we have screening protocols. And I know people get frustrated sometimes because nothing ever happens with the calls that they make, and it may have been screened out. But what I always tell people, as you gather information, as you hear other things, as other things happen, call back and tell them, I called last month, this is what I called about, this is now what I observed or what's happening, kind of like the broken record thing. So it goes to a supervisor. It's whether it's screened in or screened out. But if it is screened out, it is captured in our program, and it will be there when your call comes in again. We can look that individual's name up. We can see, okay, this is obviously progressing. It is getting worse, and possibly could be screened in at that time. So if it is screened in, it has a choice, kind of whether it's going to be adult protective service case, which all of our APS cases are, whether it's financial, sexual, physical, self-neglect, or neglect by others. So when that happens, that is usually then given to me, because like I said, I'm the kind of the main APS worker that's happening. If it is an APS case, we do have to, when we're screening it, APS cases are really someone who is vulnerable. And anyone who is vulnerable is anyone who is over 18 years old and does not have the care of any children, and they are in some type of, whether it's disability, mental incapacity, of able to make decisions for themselves, unable to maybe sometimes live on their own, not making the best choices. So that's kind of what we have to look at when we're screening those types of cases in. And you guys got a lot of really good information about financial, cases that a lot of financial information, exploitation information up here already today. So we do work very close, hand in hand, with the Sheriff's Department. Even if any financial cases do come in our office and maybe not meet our screening or not a vulnerable adult, we of course always send it to the Sheriff's Department. But if it is something that we take, then that's our second call. It's the Sheriff's Department. I usually go out with one of their detectives. They have a great team over there that's doing all of that investigating. And we reach out to the person, the family, we go out and we do our investigation. Our investigations last about 60 days, so we do have a lot of time, whether it's when it's being screened, I know I'm kind of all over the place, but sometimes when it's screened in, whether we have to look the severity of it, is it a 24-hour where we have to go out there in 24 hours, is it a 5-day, but that communication is done between the Sheriff's Department and us. And we're seeing all of the same things that you've been hearing up here, a lot of the romance scams, which it is very difficult to get through those because of the embarrassment, because of the isolation. I mean, they want it so bad to be true. And sometimes we don't get involved until after $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 is gone. So those are very difficult, the grandparent scams. But we try to educate just as much as the Sheriff's Department and everybody else up here that sometimes it is too good, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So, but we do a lot of things with education. So, and then we have physical, of course. So we do those investigations in-home. I also work with Pat Hodges sometimes if it's in assisted livings or if it's in nursing homes. We have our sexual investigations as well. Don't have as many of those, thank goodness, in this county. But that is something that we also, and then neglect by self. So if it is someone who is neglecting care of themselves, whether or not going to, whether it be hoarding situations, not getting to a doctor's appointment, not taking care of their health. And then we have neglect by others. So that could be someone who's living in the home or a family member. So there's kind of some different things there. So, but one thing we do also need to remember is that people do have the right to refuse services. And people have the right to live in ways that maybe other people don't think that they should be living that way. I always kind of, when I do presentations, take families and children for examples. If there is a family who's living in the park and they have a tent and they're eating canned goods every single day, they're providing shelter, they're providing food. Those families are allowed to live like that. And it's the same way with adults. They can make those decisions whether we think they're good decisions or not, but everybody has a right. Now, when they do get to, when an individual gets to the point where they're not making those safe decisions and they are vulnerable, they are not competent, then there's some other avenues that we can take. So guardianship being one of them. So usually this office where we are, Office on Aging, takes all the guardianships of 65 and over, and we are all the guardianships of under 65. So we have a lot of people who call our office and don't agree with a certain person or don't agree with the choices that their mom is making or their dad is making or their grandparent is making, and how do I get guardianship? And that's always a very kind of like sticky situation. So I do my best to educate those people. There are a lot of information, there's a lot of information on the internet as well. There are a lot of different parts to it, and to get guardianship, you do need to have 2 physician reports that are, one being filled out by a physician, the second one being filled out by, can be a social worker or a second physician, I believe. And it has to be within a period of time. That is then filed with the court, and it can be a very lengthy process because you are taking, you know, all decision-making from a certain person. There's guardianship of the person, and then there's guardianship of the property. So that is another thing that our office handles as well. We also have another program that a person can be screened in for if it does not reach the APS level, and that is called SSTA, which is Social Services to Adults. That is sometimes more of a lengthy process or a lengthy program, so you can be within that program for several months. Sometimes we have people in that program until their death. And really what that is kind of getting in and trying to wrap services around a person as much as possible. So whether it be getting to a doctor's office, helping schedule those, helping transport, whether there are church members who can help that individual, getting in touch with family members that may not realize that their loved ones are declining or need extra support. So it's kind of getting in and trying to wrap those services around that individual. And then we may close that case when we feel like we have made those linkages. And then our last one is our IHOS program, which stands for In-Home Aid Services. And it is very limited in this county just because we are a small county. You know, a lot of people go on the internet and they look at our IHOS program and they're like, oh, that sounds great. And it is in other bigger counties. In our county, it's kind of limited. We have one person, that was the Kara who I was talking about earlier. And we do, that is helping with transportation to doctor's appointments, helping with scheduling, getting to the grocery store, will help carry the groceries in, help put them away, very limited to maybe helping taking out the trash, but we are not deep cleaning, we are not bathing. Our in-house workers are not CNAs. In some counties they are CNAs, and those people are going to work every day in scrubs, and they're licensed, and they're helping with all of those other things. So in this county, that is a very limited program. But that's kind of a overall, I mean, how I wanted to make sure that everyone here kind of understood, like, how do you make that call and when should you make that call? And really, if you have any, you know, anything at all, just call it in, whether it's screened in, whether it's screened out. It's like I said before, it's still being captured in our program. And, you know, we're always there to kind of help. You can call us anyway. We have resources that we can certainly try to help you with. Maybe that linkage is just the thing that individual needs. Let me see, anything else that I have on here. And I have a lot of clients that I'll have just, you know, it might just be the energy assistance or food stamps that they've never had, and, you know, have them come in and I'll have you, you know, meet with someone on that side of the building, and they'll help you fill out that application. So it's not something that you have to come in and do by yourself. You certainly will have that support. It would be very helpful if you brought in an ID with you, if you brought in your financial information, like if you have your Social Security benefit letter. That's always great to have, because we do need to have proof of income. But we can certainly look and see what services that, you know, or what financial help you may be available for. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So if somebody has a client or someone in the community that they're concerned about and they call you, is that anonymous?
So yes, it is anonymous, so everything is confidential. We have a lot of people who will call in and not want to give their name whatsoever at all, which is certainly fine. You don't have to. But even if you do give your name, it is not like we're going to call that person and be like, hey, your neighbor so-and-so called in about you. But I always tell the person who is calling in that We are not going to say anything because it is confidential and we are tied to that, but that's not saying that the person that you're calling about isn't going to figure it out. If that individual told you and told you only about that certain thing, and now we're calling and saying, hey, we heard that this is happening, they certainly may figure that out. And we can certainly not control that. Now, when people have that, when they think that could be a possibility, they'll say that to us, and we certainly try to take that into consideration, like not just call and say, hey, we hear this is happening, kind of beating around the bush in some other way of not saying directly that, so it does not throw that person essentially like under the bus, but they do figure it out sometimes. And they get very angry, and I understand why people don't want to call those things in, because they know that they're going to figure out who it is, and then that person's not going to confide in them anymore, or they're not going to be friends with them anymore or talk with them. But especially if it's really something that person's really at risk, then we would like for you to call it in. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And can you clarify that if someone calls in to report a concern, that you are not going to call them back and tell them how your case is?
Yes, yeah, we have that a lot. We have that a lot in Child Protective Services, actually, but what Kathy is saying is we'll have a lot of people that'll call in, and just like what we were talking about, and then they'll call back in a couple of days and say, hey, I haven't seen anyone from the state's car out there, or, they haven't said anything, or are you taking it? Did you take it? And what's happening? And we want an update. We cannot do that. If you call in and we call you back, the only reason we would be calling you back is to get further information. Maybe there was something that wasn't clarified, or we think that you may have some more information for us. That would be the only time that we would call you back. We're not going to call you back and let you know how it's going.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks. Alderman Tom.